There is a sin that many people commit without even realizing it, and its consequences can be devastating. In this video, you will learn the impactful story of a man who had a terrifying vision of hell and received a direct message from Jesus about this hidden sin. Welcome to the channel, a space where we explore experiences that challenge our understanding of life and faith, sharing stories of transformation, redemption, and mystery. If you are not yet part of this journey, I invite you to subscribe and follow every new account I bring here. Each revealed story is an opportunity for growth and reflection. So, settle in, listen to the end, and let this moment bring a new perspective to your life. My name is Samuel. I am 52 years old, and I grew up in a deeply religious family. Since I was a child, my mother taught me to pray every morning and night, a habit I kept throughout my life. I always considered myself a righteous man, someone who followed the commandments and trusted in divine mercy. I never doubted God's forgiveness, nor did I believe that hell was real. To me, the flames of hell were just a metaphor used to scare sinners and unbelievers, not a possible destination for those like me who were devoted. I went to church, prayed, tried to live rightly, and I believed that was enough to secure my entrance into heaven. As the years passed, this conviction grew stronger. I did not fear hell because I was sure it could not reach me. After all, God is love, and in my view, He would never allow faithful Christians to be condemned. I never imagined that this belief was about to be shattered. It was a spring Saturday, one of those days that seem perfect in every detail. The sun was shining brightly, but a gentle breeze made the weather pleasant. I was at a wedding, my childhood friend Ricardo's. We had known each other since we were children, and although we had taken different paths in life, our friendship remained strong. That day was special for him, and in some way, also for me. The ceremony took place in a beautiful garden, surrounded by flowers and lush trees. It was simple but emotional. Ricardo and his bride exchanged vows in front of the guests, and seeing them, I felt at peace. I silently thanked God for that moment, for the life I was living, and for the security of my faith. After the ceremony, there was a lovely reception. Large white tents decorated with flower garlands housed the guests' tables. Soft music played in the background as everyone laughed, talked, and enjoyed the meal. I felt calm, surrounded by happy people, with no idea that my life was about to change forever. The moment for the cake arrived. Ricardo and his wife cut the first slice under the applause of the guests, and I was one of the first to grab a piece. It was a multi-layered cake, decorated with white icing and chocolate details. Without thinking much, I took a generous bite, enjoying the sweet and soft taste. However, something was wrong. Almost immediately, I felt a slight itch in my throat. At first, I ignored it, thinking it was just a passing discomfort. But within moments, the itch turned into a suffocating tightness. My breathing became heavy, my chest started to tighten, and a cold sweat ran down my forehead. I tried to stay calm, not wanting to alarm anyone. I didn't want to cause a scene at my friend's wedding. It will pass, I kept repeating to myself, but my body told a different story. With each passing second, my breathing became harder. I tried to stand, but my legs gave way. The world around me grew dark, and then everything turned to nothing. Suddenly, I was no longer there. I no longer felt my body, nor heard the sounds of the party. Only an absolute emptiness surrounded me, an impenetrable darkness that made me feel insignificant. There was no ground beneath my feet, nor sky above my head, just an oppressive silence and an endless void. For a moment I wondered if that was death. I didn't feel pain, nor fear, only a strange sense of floating in an unknown space. But then, in the distance, a light appeared. Small at first, like a distant flame, but growing stronger by the second. It wasn't an ordinary light. It seemed alive, pulsing, charged with something powerful and indescribable. I was drawn to that light, not knowing how or why. I wasn't walking, but I moved toward it, as if being called. As I got closer, the light became more intense, and within it, a figure began to form. I couldn't see its face clearly, but its presence was imposing and, at the same time, serene. Then a deep and firm voice broke the silence. "Samuel, it is time for you to see what you have always denied." That voice was not just a sound, it was something that reverberated within me as if each word penetrated my soul. A strange feeling enveloped me. While I felt peaceful in the presence of that being, a tension was growing inside me. I knew something important was about to happen. "You never believed in hell," the voice continued. "You always thought it was just a story to scare sinners. But now I will show you what you chose to ignore." Suddenly, the light around me began to dissipate, giving way to something completely different. The ground beneath me cracked as if alive, and unbearable heat filled the air. I looked around and saw a terrifying scene. A chasm opened before me, revealing giant flames rising like mountains. The air was thick, filled with a suffocating sulfuric stench. The sky, if it could be called a sky, was black, cut by red lightning that illuminated for brief moments the hellish landscape. And then I saw them. Men and women were immersed in the flames, screaming in agony. Their voices were like echoes of eternal suffering, a lament that seemed endless. Some reached their hands up as if seeking a rescue that would never come. Others writhed, consumed by a pain that words could not describe. But what terrified me the most wasn't the suffering. It was recognizing some of those faces. Among the tormented souls, I saw people I had known in life. Some of them were faithful churchgoers, people who prayed, who talked about God, who seemed to follow the right path. I saw pastors, religious leaders, people I would never imagine would be there. Their eyes reflected despair, an indescribable horror. Some seemed to murmur prayers, others just screamed, but their pleas were lost in the void. The fire surrounded them, but it didn't consume them. The suffering seemed eternal, with no possibility of relief. "Why are they here?" I asked, my voice almost inaudible. The presence beside me responded calmly but with unwavering firmness. "Because they lived in the illusion of safety. They prayed but never truly opened their hearts. They judged others, believing their faith was enough to save them, but they never faced the sin they carried within them. They lived with the certainty that they would be forgiven, but they never sought a real transformation." Those words pierced my soul. Everything I had believed seemed to crumble right there before me. I had always thought that being religious, following rituals, praying regularly was enough, but now, faced with that scene, I understood that something much greater was at stake. As I looked around, I saw scenes that seemed like living projections, as if each soul there was being forced to relive its own mistakes. Each one carried the weight of their past life, and now everything was exposed. One of the faces caught my attention. It was a man I knew well, a respected deacon at the church, always proper, disciplined, a follower of the rules. But now he was kneeling in the fire, his hands raised as if still trying to pray. The vision changed, and I saw scenes from his life. He helped at church, organized events, spoke about love and forgiveness. But at the same time, he judged and condemned in silence those who didn't follow his standard of faith. He always thought he was better than others, superior in his devotion, but he never realized that his arrogance kept him away from the true purpose of faith. Another figure appeared, a woman who faithfully attended the services, always with beautiful words about God. But now, she was there consumed by an unending torment. I saw flashes of her life showing that behind her pious image, she used her faith as a shield for her own mistakes. She hurt people, manipulated situations, believing that asking for forgiveness was enough without true repentance. I watched all of this in shock. I'd always thought that God forgave everyone who asked, but now I saw that it wasn't just about asking, it was about living that transformation. As these visions passed before my eyes, I felt a deep cold, even though I was surrounded by the heat of the flames. Each scene was a painful revelation. I realized that many of the people there truly believed they were on the right path, but deep down, they had never changed. The voice beside me broke the silence. It's not enough to recite prayers or follow traditions. Many here believe that just saying, "I believe," would be enough, but they never allowed their faith to truly transform them. They thought they could hide their sins behind empty rituals without ever seeking a pure heart. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Each face in those flames told a story, and they all seemed somehow connected to my own. But they were Christians, I murmured, trying to understand what I was seeing. They prayed, read the scriptures, went to church. How can they be here? The response came with a deep sadness, because they used faith as a shield, but never as a bridge. They judged others, but never looked at themselves. They lived believing that God's grace was automatic, but never humbled themselves truly to recognize it. My heart weighed heavy. With each word, I realized that throughout my life, I had also fallen into the same illusion, my gaze fixed on a man in particular. His face was marked by despair, and his eyes reflected an indescribable horror. I recognized him immediately. He was a very respected preacher, someone who had led countless people to faith. His name was Elias, and I remembered his passionate sermons about God's love. But now he was there, among the condemned. The fire surrounded him, and his expression was one of suffering that went beyond physical pain. He moved his lips as if still trying to preach, but his words were lost in the void. "Even him," I whispered, feeling a lump in my throat. The voice beside me replied, "Yes." He spoke about me, taught about me, but he never truly knew me. His heart was full of pride. He sought recognition from men, not approval from God. His words touched multitudes, but his inner self was never transformed. The words echoed inside me. Elias had dedicated his life to ministry, but now he was there in eternal torment. I felt my own heart racing. If someone like him could be condemned, what about me? I continued walking through that horrific scene, each step bringing a new, painful revelation. I saw men and women who in life boasted of their good deeds, but had never truly surrendered to God. Some were religious leaders, others simple believers, but they all had one thing in common. They trusted more in their own righteousness than in true transformation. The voice beside me continued, "Pride is a silent poison." Many who are here never imagined they would be condemned. They thought it was enough to follow the rules, show devotion in public, and compare themselves to others to feel righteous. But I don't see appearances. I see the heart. Those words struck my spirit like a blow. I began to remember moments from my own life. How many times had I judged others? How many times had I felt superior to those who didn't follow the faith as strictly as I did? I always thought my devotion guaranteed me a place in heaven, but now, in light of this crushing truth, I realized how blind I had been. "And I asked, my voice trembling, "what would happen to me if I had died today?" The presence beside me was silent for a moment. Then it replied with a firm voice but filled with compassion, "You would have joined them." My heart froze. My body trembled. My heart beat wildly as if struck by a truth I had never wanted to face. The flames around me seemed more intense, the screams clearer. That place was not just a warning, it was a fate that could have been mine. But I always prayed. I always tried to be a good Christian. I protested, my voice full of despair. The presence beside me responded calmly, but without softening the truth. "You prayed, but without humility. You followed rules, but your heart was hardened. You trusted more in your own righteousness than in my true forgiveness. How many times did you judge others thinking you were above them? How many times did you use your faith as a shield to avoid seeing your own sins?" Each word cut through my soul like a blade. There were no excuses, no arguments. I realized that throughout my life, I had lived in the illusion that just being religious was enough to be saved. But now, I understood that much more was needed. "So what should I do?" I asked, with tears in my eyes. The presence responded, "Abandon your pride, learn true humility, recognize that you are no better than anyone and that you need my forgiveness every day, not just with words, but with your heart. I felt an immense weight upon me, as if I were finally seeing my true reflection for the first time. My heart was exposed, and the truth was painful. Then, everything around me began to change. The fire and darkness receded, and I found myself being pulled away from that place. It was as if an invisible force was dragging me out of the abyss, and little by little, the feeling of torment faded. Suddenly, I opened my eyes. The sound of machines beeping and muffled voices filled my ears. I was back. My vision was still blurry, but I recognized the environment. A hospital. My chest rose and fell with difficulty, and my body felt exhausted, as if I had been torn from a real nightmare. I slowly turned my head and saw my wife sitting beside me, her eyes red from crying. When she realized I was awake, she squeezed my hand tightly, as if fearing I might disappear again. "You're back," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I wanted to answer, but my mind was still caught on what I had seen. Hell, the condemned souls, the words echoing in my mind. I knew it hadn't been just a dream or a hallucination caused by my condition. I had been there. I had seen what many choose to ignore, and above all, I knew I had been given a second chance. The following days were of deep reflection. My body was still recovering, but my soul would never be the same. With each passing moment, I relived that experience, trying to understand the magnitude of what had been shown to me. Before, I believed my faith was enough, that my devotion guaranteed me a place by God's side. But now I knew it wasn't enough to just follow rules or participate in religious rituals. It required more. It required genuine humility, true repentance, and a deep transformation of the heart. I looked at my wife, who was still by my side, holding my hand with care and concern. I knew I needed to tell her what I had seen. But how could I explain something so grand and terrifying? How could I describe a truth that so many refused to see? I took a deep breath and, with my voice still weak, said, "I saw hell." Her eyes widened. I needed to share that experience, not just with her, but with everyone who could hear it. Because now I understood this was my mission. In the following days, every prayer I made was different. Before, I prayed mechanically with repeated words, without ever truly reflecting on their meaning. Now, every word that left my mouth was filled with repentance and humility. I began to see my life with new eyes. I began to question actions I had once considered irrelevant. Small judgments, thoughts of superiority, pride disguised as religious zeal. All those things that once seemed harmless now weighed on me like invisible chains. I realized that I could no longer live as I had before. I had been saved not by merit, but by mercy. God had given me a second chance, and wasting it would be the greatest mistake of my life. So I made a decision. I would speak about what I had seen, about the danger of spiritual pride, about the error of blindly trusting in one's own righteousness. I needed to warn those who, like me, lived deluded by the false security of a faith without transformation. It didn't matter if they doubted me, if they called me crazy or exaggerated. I knew the truth. And now, my mission was to share it. From that day on, my life was never the same. I no longer saw faith in the same way. Before, I saw God as a distant judge, someone who evaluated our actions and decided whether we deserved heaven or not. But now, I understood that He didn't just want obedient followers, but children with sincere hearts. I began to observe more closely the people around me. I saw so many Christians living the same way I had before, secure in the belief that they were on the right path, but never truly reflecting on their true intentions. I saw pride disguised as devotion, judgments made in the name of faith, and a blind trust that merely attending church was enough. It was then that I understood. Hell was not reserved only for the openly wicked. Many who considered themselves just were walking toward damnation without realizing it. Not because God rejected them, but because they never allowed themselves to change truly. And that was when I made my final decision. I could not keep this truth to myself. I had to speak. I had to warn people before it was too late. I began to share my experience with those around me. At first, many listened with curiosity, but also with skepticism. Some thought I had just had a dream, a hallucination caused by the shock of what had happened to me. Others became uncomfortable, as if the truth I was telling was something they preferred not to face. But there were those who listened with open hearts, people who, like me, realized that their faith had become mechanical, empty of real transformation. Men and women who, deep down, also carried the false security of a devotion based only on rituals, not on true repentance. I didn't care about the skeptical looks or those who laughed at my story. I knew my mission wasn't to convince everyone, but to plant a seed. If even one person could awaken to this truth, then my experience would have been worth it. Since then, every day of my life has been lived with a new purpose. I no longer see faith as an automatic guarantee of salvation, but as a path that requires effort, humility, and constant transformation. Now, before each prayer, I examine my heart. I ask myself if I'm truly seeking God or just trying to feel better about myself. Before judging someone, I remember what I saw. I remember the faces of those who also believed they were saved, but had ignored what truly mattered. My message to those who hear me is simple. Don't be deceived by spiritual pride. Don't think that just attending church or following external rules is enough. True faith is not shown only by words, but by a heart willing to change. Don't ignore this warning. Hell is real. And it is not just for the openly wicked. Many who consider themselves just might be walking toward it without realizing it. If you've come this far, know that this message didn't come to you by chance. Maybe, just like I once did, you believed that your faith alone was enough. Maybe you trusted only in rituals, without looking inside yourself. But today, you have the opportunity to reflect, to change, to draw closer to God with true humility. Don't wait until it's too late. Live with a repentant heart, open to transformation. Seek God not just with words, but with actions. Because in the end, it won't be how much you attended church or how many prayers you repeated that will determine your destiny, but the true state of your soul. Thank you for watching until the end. If this message touched you in any way, share it with those who also need to hear it. And if you want to continue this journey of reflection and transformation, subscribe to the channel and follow the upcoming videos. May this experience be an awakening for all of us.